revisit, or you can ask now. So before I, because one question per person, I think will be.
No, liquidity is a very small question. It has been remaining in deficit for a goodish bit, and now there'll be withdrawal of currency because of Diwali, and then again advance taxes will come. Can you give a little more assurance? At the moment, it almost looks like banks are borrowing from MSF and have to invest in the bond auctions. So,
no,
will you give
okay.
an overnight BRR, something like that? Some more assurance.
Yeah, overnight I have said it in my statement that as in the past, we will continue to do the fine-tuning operations on both directions to absorb as well as to inject. But coming to the liquidity, what you said, liquidity being tight, let me say very clearly, the liquidity is not tight. The net LAF continues to be in surplus for the last 2 years. More than 2 years, the net LAF continues to be in surplus, except I think maybe 2-3 days when because of this the standing liquidity facility, as we call it, the SLF, for the primary dealers, if you take that into account, then it became deficit. But liquidity, the net LAF has remained positive throughout last 2.5 years or so. Secondly, the banks, many of the banks are holding excess SLR and excess CRR, and some of them have also started dipping into their excess CRR and excess SLR because they need the cash to support and sustain their lending operations. And then there is this temporary movement of cash, temporary movement of liquidity from the system. It has gone into a different basket because of high GST and direct tax collections. The second half expenditures of government are always very high. And when I say government, I include both state and central governments. So they're very high. Today, for example, the salary payments will take place, the additional DA payments will take place, and usually the government expenditure picks up very well. So that will come back. So if you take everything into account, the system liquidity is in the order of about, let's say about 5 lakh crores. So I think there is no worry about, there should not be any concern about liquidity being suddenly tight.
Thank you, sir. I'll move on to Shitama Bose from Financial Express.
Good afternoon, sir. My first question is on tokenization. The circular kicks in tomorrow. So how do you gauge the readiness of the system as it stands now and any disruptions that you foresee? And the other quick question is that there's recently been action taken against one of the major NBFCs for their recovery processes. Are you looking into other NBFCs' recovery processes as well? And can we expect any comprehensive guidelines on this? Thanks.
I'll ask Deputy Governor Ravi Shankar to reply on the tokenization bid, and the other part of the question, I think DG Jain can take that question, and DG Rajeshwar Rao also.
Yeah, on tokenization, the system
Mike.
is... on tokenization, the system is ready. Roughly about 35 crore tokens have already been created. As per the data we have, in September itself, about 40% of transactions were undertaken using tokens. The value has roughly been about 63 crores so far that has been done. You see, ever since we issued the regulations in March of 2020, we have been constantly talking to all the stakeholders just to ensure that the transition to the tokenization framework happens smoothly. We have talked to merchants, domestic, foreign, we have talked to payment aggregators, we have talked to all possible stakeholders. Wherever required, we have given extensions, and as you know, we have given many extensions so that the system is comfortable switching over, because we just wanted to make sure that the customer safety doesn't get compromised because of problems faced in the implementation of tokenization. The feedback we have from virtually all stakeholders is that it is perfectly ready, the system can go on. There will always be, and I believe there are, I understand there are a few, participants who may not be ready, but that would largely be because, or probably because of their unwillingness to comply. And we don't believe that we should hold back efforts to ensure customer protection because of because of such laggards. Eventually, they might take a little bit of more time, but all of them will come onto the framework soon enough.
Thank you. Who is taking? You are taking, or yeah?
We don't envisage any impact on the other NBFCs because the specific restriction is related to one entity. We have not stopped or restricted the outsourcing activities. What we have issued, various guidelines were issued on outsourcing activities and the fair practices code. We expect that the regulated entities have to come out with their board approved policies and have a more oversight and the monitoring around the outsourcing activities. And it's not taking away the rightful right of the regulated entities not to pursue for their recovery. What we expect that it should be on the right side of the law.
You can add something.
I think just to supplement what DG Jain mentioned, I think we had issued a circular on outsourcing of financial services and the responsibilities of the recovery agents in August, and that is fairly comprehensive. Prior to that, when we issued the master direction on microfinance institutions, the responsibilities of the recovery agents have been clearly specified. Both these instructions would get integrated, and we are coming out with a master direction on guidelines for outsourcing and conduct of by the financial recovery agencies. So that will also come out shortly. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Before we go ahead, once again request limit yourself to one question in order to have the best utilization of the time. So now I move on to Mr. Anup Roy from Bloomberg.
Thank you, sir. Sir, you have cut the growth forecast. You have warned about a global growth recession, and also, are you now concerned about growth? I mean, little bit concerns of growth coming back, and inflation is little, and are you still guiding of a soft landing?
I think I would request Deputy Governor Michael Patro to take that question.
Actually, the adjustment in the projections take into account the release of the first quarter data by the NSO, which came below our forecast. Otherwise, if you see the rest of the quarter, there is actually a pickup in momentum in the rest of the year. So we remain focused on price stability as our primary goal, but we have a dual mandate, so we do take into account our concerns about growth. And on the issue of soft landing, that's really a soft landing is for the advanced economies. For India, it is takeoff.
Thank you, sir. I'll move on to Mr. Manojit Saha from the Business Standard.
Good afternoon, sir. On what you said on stance, are you indicating that the stance will only change if the liquidity goes to deficit and the real rate becomes positive?
We'll have to wait and see, because the situation is playing out, and I would not like to sort of tie up myself with any specific formulation like that and fuel some kind of market expectation that about the future course of action. I have only explained that the monetary policy, the overall monetary conditions, taking into account the liquidity and the repo rate and the inflation, current inflation as well as 6 months ahead inflation, I have only said that we are still, the monetary conditions are still accommodative. So going forward, we will constantly evaluate, re-evaluate, and as and when required, we will spell out whatever is the decision at that point of time.
I think if I can add, do you have anything in mind on when do you see the repo rate, the inflation is coming to 4%? Because that is what you have to mention when you write the letter to the government after October inflation number comes out.
No, we'll write a letter to the government, so let me not preempt what we will write to the government, because that is also, if you see the legal provisions under the RBI Act and the regulations and the rules, MPC has to have a meeting to discuss the Reserve Bank's reply to the government. So what we will write, I will not say, but as I have said earlier, we are expecting the inflation to come down close to the target over a 2-year cycle. And that is our expectation even now. That was our expectation earlier and even now. But then again, there are so many uncertainties which are playing out and coming in almost, coming in from time to time.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. I'll move on to Ms. Pratigya Vajpayee from Informist Media.
Sir, you've pointed out that liquidity remains in huge surplus, but we've seen overnight rates, especially the weighted average call rate, persisting above the repo rate. So is this a situation that RBI is comfortable with? And also, since you have said that you'll calibrate rates as well as liquidity according to the evolving inflation growth dynamics, would you consider withdrawing durable liquidity even if banking system liquidity or rather overnight rates are higher?
I think you can take that question.
As Governor mentioned, the overnight rates started firming up when the advanced tax flows went out of the system. Currently, the market is facing what is called the half-yearly balance sheet date, the September 30th balance sheet date. So there is temporary tightness now. We expect that to ease in October itself as the flows down.
Thank you, sir. I'll move on to Mr. Mayur Shetty from the Times of India.
Thank you, Yogesh. Thank you, Governor. Governor, the RBI has been very effective in transmitting interest rates to on the lending side because of the repo rate linked loans. But on the deposit side, its rates are very slow to move. Do you think it's desirable to have similar linkage on the deposit side as well?
I think you have said it. Our external benchmark is linked to the lending rates. But I have answered this question even in an earlier MPC that the bank credit is now picking up. There is still surplus liquidity in the system, but all of you are talking about liquidity tightness. Credit is picking up. So obviously the banks need more resources for which they have to necessarily raise their deposit rates. The repo rates have been increased by 190 basis points, after we started this cycle of raising interest rates. Yesterday, the government has increased the small savings rates by 20 to 30 basis points in about 3 or 4 instruments. So I think all these factors taken together, the banks will, going forward, I am sure the banks will consider and take, increase deposit rates. Anything else you want to add to this?
No, I think generally the monetary policy targets the lending rate. The deposit rate in a hardening interest rate scenario is always having a lag. As Governor has said, there was enough liquidity available in the system. And when enough liquidity is available in the system, that is being utilized by the banks. Governor also talked about in a statement about excess SLR. So overall, if we have to see the CD ratio has not gone up much. The incremental CD ratio is being met by the banks through various sources of their funding, including raising the CD commercial deposits as well as the bulk deposit. So we are not seeing any trend or the mismatch in the ALM, structural liquidity on a short end. And the LCR is also very high, pretty high.
And if you see around 15th August, I think many banks introduced new products, many new deposit schemes. So our expectation is that going forward, you will see more traction with regard to the adjustment of deposit rates.
Thank you, sirs. अब मैं आमंत्रित करता हूँ ब्रजेश कुमार from Z Business.
Mike.
सर मेरा सवाल 2 छोटे सवाल हैं। एक सवाल ये है कि हम ये देखते हैं कि जब दूसरे और कई रेगुलेटर्स को कंपेयर करते हैं तो वो जो ऑर्डर्स अपने निकालते हैं वो रीजनड ऑर्डर्स होते हैं कि किसी एंटिटी के खिलाफ, चाहे वो बैंक हो या चाहे कोई लिस्टेड एंटिटी हो, चाहे कोई भी हो, रीजनड ऑर्डर्स होते हैं कि क्या एलिगेशंस थे, क्या उसका जवाब था, और उसके बाद वो हम पढ़ते हैं, असेस करते हैं, हमें पता चलता है कि पूरी पिक्चर क्या है। आरबीआई के जो ऑर्डर्स आते हैं एंटिटीज़ के, चाहे वो बैंक हो, तो एज ए डिपॉजिटर अगर कोई दूसरी एंटिटी है जो लिस्टेड एंटिटी है, एज ए शेयर होल्डर मुझे ऐसे लगता है कि वो हमें पता होना चाहिए कि क्या रीजंस रहे हैं इसके खिलाफ एक्शन लेने के। एक सवाल ये, दूसरा सवाल छोटा सा।
एक मिनट मैं इसको रिप्लाई कर देता हूँ। एंड अगेन जैसे योगेश जी ने कहा, मैं सबको ये अनुरोध करूँगा कि एक सवाल पूछिए, क्योंकि 2-3 हो जाता है तो फिर टाइम सबको चांस नहीं मिलेगा। हमारा जो डिटेल्ड ऑर्डर है वो रेगुलेटेड एंटिटी जो है उनको हम कम्युनिकेट करते हैं। प्रेस नोट हम जब इशू करते हैं उसमें जो ऑर्डर का जो जिस्ट है, जो इम्पोर्टेंट हाइलाइट्स है, वो हमारा प्रेस रिलीज में हम बता देते हैं, जो कि मतलब सबको अवेलेबल है, पब्लिक डोमेन में अवेलेबल है। लेकिन जो रीजन्ड ऑर्डर है वो रेगुलेटेड एंटिटीज़ को कम्युनिकेट किया जाता है, जिसमें उनका जो रिप्लाई आया है, उनका जो उत्तर आया है, उसको हम डिटेल्ड एनालाइज करके उसके साथ हम क्यों, कहाँ सहमत है, कहाँ सहमत नहीं है, क्यों सहमत नहीं, ये सब करके हम उनको रिप्लाई देते हैं।
पब्लिक करने की पॉसिबिलिटी,
सॉरी
पब्लिक करने
आई
की
थिंक
possibility?
मैंने रिप्लाई दे दिया आपका क्वेश्चन का।
थैंक यू।
ठीक,
Have your question later on. Thank you.
धन्यवाद।
I'll move on to Anshika Kast from the Hindu Business Line.
Good afternoon, sir. Sir, you mentioned that there are adequate reserves, forex reserves, but there's been some amount of depletion. Does the RBI have a level of emergency buffer in mind, and then what room does that leave the RBI to intervene further, given that further devaluation in the currency is expected?
You see, as regards the adequacy of reserves, I have addressed this point in the monetary policy statement, where I have mentioned about, with regard to the various vulnerabilities of any country's reserve, how we stand compared to the other emerging market economies and to the other countries. And almost in all parameters, our vulnerability is far less than most of the emerging market economies. So it's a process of constant evaluation that we do, and we will take a call. We will take a call depending, and interestingly, I also mentioned this point, to dispel any public sort of notion. Even in the first quarter of this year, there has been, on a BOP basis, there has been a accretion of 4.6 billion US dollars. So therefore, in our assessment, taking into account the current level of reserves, taking into account the various vulnerabilities vis-a-vis the external sector, I think we are comfortably based and we are comfortably placed, and our buffers are quite strong.
Thank you, sir. I'll move on to Mr. Vishwanathan Nair from BQ Prime.
Governor, just taking Manoj's question on real rate and neutral stance forward, you made this comparison to the 2019 scenario, where you said that the current inflation-adjusted policy rate is still trailing that level. Is that what we are targeting? I know you said that you don't want to give a forward guidance in the current environment, but is that what you're targeting?
Well, I don't want to repeat myself what I said, but I would request Dr. Michael Patra if he can put it in a different manner or explain the same thing in his own language.
I actually have talked about this before. So the issue is not the sojourn, but the journey. And the journey has two milestones: when inflation gets into the tolerance band and when it aligns with the target. You'll know.
Thank you, sirs. I'll move on to Mr. Hitesh Vyas from the Indian Express.
Hi, sir. Good afternoon. You said that RBI doesn't target a particular level of rupee, but is RBI comfortable with rupee hovering around 82 at current level, sir?
I mean, I can't answer that question. The level at which RBI will be comfortable. And in any case, you see, the global situation is constantly changing. I mean, and as a central bank, we can never give a and I have said that we don't have any specific level of the rupee in mind. It all depends on our macroeconomic fundamentals. It depends on the overall global situation. We don't target a specific rate. And when I am saying it, it's not just a part of the usual conventional lexicon of RBI. We mean it. We don't have this thing. We don't have a specific level of the rupee.
Thank you, sir. I'll move on to Ms. Chloe Cornish from the Financial Times.
Thank you, Yogesh. Thank you, Governor. Just to ask you about your observations on the uptake of rupee settlement. What are you seeing there from that new policy?
Ravi, I think you can take that.
If I understood you right, you want to understand what the response has been. The response has been, has been fairly good, but since the process involves, a lot of vetting at the level of banks, at the level of the central bank, at the level of the government, the initial process is taking some time. But we have received responses from many countries, and we are receiving, responses from many banks as well locally.
So could you give us a sense of which countries you're receiving responses from?
I wouldn't like to discuss the countries specifically, but yes, we have got it from at least about 4 or 5 countries that I know of so far, and interest from others as well.
Does that include Russia?
Like I said, I wouldn't like to give out any particular name, but we have received those interests.
I'll move on to Mr. Anand Adhikari from Business Today.
Good afternoon, sir. So we now have, the trade deficit data for the 5 months. Sorry, here. Sorry, sir. So we now have, the trade deficit data, for the 5 months, and it's around, 124 billion, a run rate of around 23, 24, per month. I just want to understand. I mean, is 5 months is a good enough period, to assess the CAD for the entire year, because their projection, around 3.5 and 3.5% plus, for the entire year.
Yeah, we are watching the trade deficit, but there are other moving parts in the balance of payments. Like one thing that has happened is that oil prices have eased a bit, so the oil import bill will be lower. Also, windfall taxes have been slashed, so petroleum exports have grown 23% in August. Also, services exports are doing very well, and now they're getting a boost from travel because tourism has picked up in a big way. So all in all, we expect that the current account deficit may widen modestly in the first half, but narrow in the second half. So overall, we expect it to be under 3% of GDP.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So we are moving towards the halfway mark, means half an hour mark. So we'll take last 3-4 questions, if you permit. So I'll invite Ankur Mishra from ET Now to ask his question.
Governor, I want to ask question on securitization of stressed assets, which has been announced today. So is it separate from ARC securitization, which is already happening? So will that also continue along with that? First, that clarification. Along with that, ARC guidelines were also expected from long time now. How soon we can expect that?
I think DG Rajeshwar Rao can take.
Answer to your first question is yes. It is in addition to whatever are the guidelines for securitization of under the ARC route. And second, the guidelines on ARC are very close to completion. We should be issuing it shortly.
Thank you, sir. And I'll move on to Mr. Laltendu Mishra from The Hindu.
Thank you, sir. The noted economist has observed, you spoke about the new storm that is in the horizon and already there. A noted economist has said that the US economy and the global economy are heading for a long and ugly recession by the end of this year. Your comment, please. Do you have enough firepower to withstand it?
No, frankly, I cannot comment on opinions which are expressed by eminent persons, eminent thinkers and economists. And there are so many opinions which are expressed in the market almost every day, even in the market, in the media, and in the various academic journals. We get to read and go through all of them. Internally also, our research teams do look at them very carefully, very intensively. And so far as India is concerned, as I have said, our buffers are very strong. Our focus is always on maintaining financial stability and macroeconomic stability. The Reserve Bank, as a central bank, has to maintain price stability and financial stability. That is uppermost objective of the Reserve Bank, like any other bank. At this point of time, I also mentioned that having weathered the two major shocks over the last 2.5 years, in fact, if you recall, when the COVID-19 pandemic started, the expectations were that, all countries will take massive hit. In fact, our what you call the models of the FSR models, for example, the methodologies that we have, what you call the frameworks, the financial stability report, the stress tests, the stress test models that we have under our financial stability report, it showed that under severe stress conditions, the NPAs, GNPAs can go up to 16% plus. That did not happen. And that did not happen just like that. It did not happen because the Reserve Bank intervened and came out with various announcements. We gave moratorium. We gave a very calibrated, targeted, and not open-ended, a very prudent resolution framework. We gave a separate framework for the MSMEs. So throughout the pandemic, and then throughout, after the war has started, the Reserve Bank has responded from time to time. And we will, we draw confidence from the fact that how all of us as a country have dealt with it. And I must also mention about the fiscal action, which was also very timely, prudent, and targeted. The way the country dealt with the entire vaccination issue. But coming back to Reserve Bank, we have dealt with challenges in the past. There are challenges in front of us, ahead of us. Buffers continue to be strong. Our priority is price and financial stability. And I ended my statement by saying that the prospects of Indian economy, there is optimism and there is confidence.
Thank you, sir. I'll move on to Mr. Ben Joe from the PTI.
Good morning, Governor. You retain the growth at 7%. Is it a bit too optimistic, or because that is the consensus everybody has? Because last year you had a higher rate, and then in April, in August, you lowered it. And then none of the numbers justify as 1% growth that is happening.
Yeah, you can take that question.
Yeah, as I mentioned, we took into account the revised, the number that was put out by the National Statistics Office for the first quarter. We also took into account the high frequency indicators for the rest of the year that are available till now. And we see a quickening of momentum in the second quarter. If you see, we've slightly adjusted our quarterly path, and therefore it is at 7%.
The second last question, Shyama Mishra from Doordarshan.
Hello, sir. Sir, global factors are not easy right now. It's not going to ease soon. आप बार-बार ये mention करते हैं कि इंडिया की जो economy है काफ़ी resilient है. कब तक हम withstand कर सकते हैं इसे, and what do we need to do, not just to withstand but also lead as an example?
You see, what we need to do, you will see as the situation unfolds. Because I frankly don't know what are the new challenges and what are the new factors which will come up. So as and when they come up, we will respond to that. But we also try and anticipate what could happen. So at this point of time, I cannot say really what we will do next. It will depend on how the situation evolves. But हमारा जो overall macroeconomic fundamentals है, जो financial sector है, I mentioned about it also. The financial sector today is is displaying, improved performance parameters. Whether you look at the provision coverage ratio of the banks, or you look at the GNPA or the capital adequacy, in all respects, the banks and non-banks, they remain quite resilient. That's about the financial sector. The inflation levels, we have projected that it is expected to moderate going forward. They are high at present. 7% is the number that we have for August, which was published on September 12th. And there is expectation that the September number could be little high, little higher than 7%. But that is already factored into our calculation, and we have provided the path that this year we will still have 6.7%. Growth also at this point of time looks, there are many indicators which point to a strong, resilience of activities, and activities are picking up. So therefore, हमारा जो overall situation in India, it's quite continues to be very resilient. So that gives us the confidence.
Thank you, sir. Last question to Siddhi Nayak from Money Control.
Thank you, Yogesh. So my first question is, like the Fed has been very aggressive of late and they have been sounding hawkish. Is there a target, interest rate differential target that the MPC has right now? That's the first question. And second one is on the letter that you will be writing to the RBI, the government. Would that be made public? And what would be the frequency with which we'll have to write that letter? Will that have to be every month or every quarter, or how does that work?
The frequency, though, I think the Act doesn't provide any frequency of writing that letter because there is no such provision. And what was the second?
Public domain.
In the public domain, again, I mean, it's a privileged communication between the Reserve Bank and the government. So at this point of time, I cannot say whether it will be made public. From our side, we will not make it public, because it is a privileged communication from the central bank to the government. And with regard to the interest rate differential, as I mentioned, our monetary policy decisions with regard to rates is not determined by what rates prevail or what rate action is being taken by the other central banks. Our rates, our monetary policy actions will depend on our domestic situation.
Thank you, sir. With this, we have come to the close of the press conference. I want to thank everyone for being present here and being very orderly audience in this. Season's greetings from the Reserve Bank side, and all the very best to you. Till the next time, stay safe, stay healthy. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So it has been as orderly as the